Hello and welcome to She Leads Collective podcast. I'm Mary Gregory and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead as a woman today and how we can all show up with more courage, care and clarity. You'll hear from inspiring women, powerful allies and bold truth tellers who are changing the game, not by playing tougher, but by leading smarter, softer and stronger. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the She Leads Collective podcast. What does it take to rise fast and stay grounded in a world moving at the speed of AI? My guest today is India Hatfield, Senior Manager in AI Product Innovation at Capgemini Invent, and someone whose career has already spanned supply chain leadership, data science and cutting-edge technology, all before turning 30. A graduate of the GSK Future Leaders Programme and the University of Exeter, India is sharp, curious and full of drive. But she's also unafraid to pause, reflect and reset to pace her career on her own terms. I've known India a long time. She's my daughter's bestie and I've observed her navigate her career and been so impressed I thought she'd be a great guest and role model. So I'm really pleased she's here. I'm hoping that in this conversation, we're going to be talking about what it means to lead as a young woman in a male-dominated space, the choice to step back without stepping away, and how her awareness of gender and identity has shaped the kind of leader she wants to be. Whether you're early in your career or decades in, I think you'll find India's perspective refreshing and honest, and I hope deeply relevant. India, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Mary. What a wonderful intro. I've got a high bar to live up to.
Well, you're very impressive, India. That's why I invited you here. So let's get going and just talk a bit about your motivation and your career and what got you started, really. Because I know that you studied, was it biochemistry
Yep.
at university?
Yep.
So what then led you into the career that you've now chosen?
Great question. So, after my biochemistry degree, or during actually, I did a placement year, and that's when I first started at GlaxoSmithKline or GSK. So there was quite a natural progression, but I never wanted to be in a lab. I'm very clumsy, so lab work was never for me. And I was really lucky that I got a placement year working in kind of supply chain management. Really enjoyed it, really loved it, and then naturally progressed into their graduate scheme afterwards. But the AI pieces kind of came a bit later. So supply chains are massive and complex and difficult to understand. And I was really lucky that I got placed in kind of an AI product innovation type team, although it wasn't called that at the time. And I loved it. And that's kind of when I started to carve out my career in more of a data science or technical space, product space, and ultimately what led me to Capgemini Invent in my current role.
So you're in the innovation part of Capgemini. It's supply chain. You're in your late 20s. Did you ever imagine this is where you would be?
No. No, definitely not. I think when I first started my career, I remember when I first joined GSK, I was like completely tied up in the ambition of GSK and the fact that they, wanted people to do more, feel better, live longer. And I was like, I want to be, VP of whatever in GSK. I want to climb the ranks.
You're ambitious from the beginning.
I was super ambitious. But I think there was a moment where I thought, actually, I'd had 5 years at GSK in total. I thought it was fantastic and it was a great place to work. But there are other domains, right? Like pharmaceuticals is just one thing. And that's where, for me, consulting gave me breadth. I could understand. I currently work in a big public sector organization and I do work on supply chain, but I also work on finance, procurement, lots of different processes. So that definitely gave me the breadth that I wanted. And I also think there's been lots of people throughout my career who've said, and yes, I've moved very quickly. I'm not going to pretend I haven't, but take your time and enjoy the horizontal moves rather than just the vertical moves. Because once you get to positions like VP, you're under a lot of pressure, a lot of accountability, and you want to make sure that when you're there, you're ready to be there, but also you might not want to be there straight away or potentially ever. So I think my perception on what my career looks like is always changing and shifting, and that's okay because the world is completely different now to it was when I started.
It's the ambition to be VP that was driving you rather than I want to head up AI and innovation.
Yes, my mum was previously a partner in a law firm or had a very classic legal career where she climbed the ladder. You know, she worked in magic circle firms. She did fantastically well, but I think I kind of always saw her in that position rather than necessarily the domain knowledge that she was doing, and that was somewhat attractive when I was growing up, or a good benchmark to set myself to.
So your mum was a role model.
100%. And then, but I think as you get older, I have a very good relationship with my mum, right? She's fantastic and she's very candid about what that meant for her to get to partner so quickly in her career and the choices that she made. And sometimes that meant less time with me and my sisters and less time with family. So I think my ambition to be okay, let's try and get to VP or whatever has now shifted to be like actually what's important in the context across my life. Like what are the pillars, what are my values? Because it's not just work, right? You don't live to work, or hopefully you don't. You work to live, right?
Okay, lovely. We will explore that in a bit further shortly, but I just want to hang on with where we are about your career as it stands. I get a sense that you really love what you do
Yes.
because that's the impression you give me, and you've always given me that impression. What is it then that you really love? Because you've had quite different jobs.
So I'm a problem solver at heart, right? So I love when people come to me and they tell me, here's all my pain, here's all the stuff that keeps me up at night. This is what I hate about my job. And then I love being able to come in and sift through all of those pain points and work out, okay, actually, how can we make this an easier place for this person? So whether that be they have to find loads of difficult complex information in a whole host of documents, you can use tools like ChatGPT or OpenAI models to help understand like long, complex documentation. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. You know, it's right now I work in an organization that has a lot of assets, so it can be all our cars have broken down and they're never ready for us to go and do all of our tests. And then it's actually, okay, how do we build maybe an ML or AI model that can predict when an engine might fail? And then how can we better prepare the business so they're not, you know, consistently maybe missing KPIs because their equipment is just not in a fit state. So for me, it always comes back to, you know, I want to talk to the grumpy people. I want to talk to the people that are annoyed, and I want to understand where that pain is coming from and then hopefully design and build them a product that fundamentally makes their lives easier, because we all have to work and we need to make sure that we're doing it in the most like optimal way, but more from a personal lens necessarily than a money organizational lens.
So it's making a difference for your clients and seeing the
Yeah.
results that you're helping them achieve
Yeah.
through helping them solve their problems. I get
Yeah.
that. That is what's fulfilling for you,
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing.
I think there's also the element of my career now is a lot of like mentoring, coaching, supporting like my product owners or the technical teams that are in my portfolio be successful. So there's a lot of like individual personal development too that I really enjoy. And that doesn't just happen across like my Capgemini colleagues. You know, we have blended teams of public sector people in our product squads as such. So I think it's also that side of it as well. Like, how do you help younger people or people that are more junior to me, not even necessarily younger, hone out their core consulting skills or hone out their problem solving skills and help them be more confident, you know, facilitating workshops and driving conversations with new customers and clients too. So it's a two-sided coin.
Great. And I get that that's also very fulfilling as well, then helping others grow, develop, blossom, which is the leadership
Mm,
side of
mm,
things. So I've observed your career from afar, and you've had a very fast trajectory so far. You've been
mm,
promoted several times. I remember you talking about leading people who are dealing with very different issues because they're possibly older than you. They may be at different life stages than you, and yet
mm.
you're still leading and managing them. So how have you found that as a young leader?
Most of the time, I've been very lucky and I've never had any or rarely had kind of challenge back, considering I'm in some circumstances younger than individuals I'm managing. But I think when it has been more sticky, the best thing to do is like always try and root yourself in their experience as much as you can. So I work with quite a lot of people who have children and I don't have children and they have childcare commitments. So that's maybe a slightly easy, well, I say easier, but it's one that I can relate to in the sense of I have some friends with young children, or I have cousins with young
Mm.
children, and it's I think work is a much better place than it used to be around. Okay, yeah, you've got to go and do pickup at 4 p.m. Off you go, like absolutely, or encouraging colleagues to take time back, regardless actually of children or not, when they've done extra hours is really important to me. But there's one particular time that kind of jumps out of my head when I was working at GSK and I was leading a team of developers to develop a new budget setting tool. And I had teams globally. So I had teams in Asia and the US. So I was working quite crazy hours because I was waking up early to be with my teams in India, check in on how they were doing, and then staying on late to check in with my team in the US. And they were all older than me, and I was probably 26. But the thing that I spent time doing was just trying to get to know them as people first, rather than trying to come in and tell them what to do and give them deadlines straight away. Because when you're spending that amount of time with people at work, again, spend at least 7.5 hours of your day at work, right? If you feel like you're doing that with people you don't know, like it doesn't motivate you. And if you don't ask questions and if you're not curious and you don't know about people's circumstance, and there's a balance, right? Because you don't want to pry, but you don't ask questions about how someone's weekend was, or like, where they live and what their living situation is, you might not realize that they could have caring commitments, they could have young children, they could have they could have had an accident themselves and be currently have a broken foot, right, and be slightly immobile. So I think there's a moment where you just have to go in and also be try and be your authentic self, ask questions, be curious, and get to know people on a human level, because the reality is we've all had a boss who just tells us down the phone, go and do this. And then we've all had a boss who's fantastic and who knows you and sees you and then says, can you do this? So it's better to always like lead, I think, with that personal touch.
So we've got our own role models, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And is that something you feel you've learned, or is it something that you've naturally done?
I think I've always naturally done it, in the sense of I am that classic extrovert. Like I get my energy from other people. I love learning about other people. I love learning about their hobbies. But what I've learned to do is, and I don't mean this in, I'm not saying this in a clever way, but there's a way to do it in which you make people feel remembered and you make them feel special, which then ultimately helps you as a leader. So if you ask somebody, specifically, how's your wife, and you can name their wife, or if you ask them how their pet corgi called Podges, they remember that you remember, and that ultimately helps you be like a more approachable and effective leader.
So what I'm hearing then really is what you put at the heart of your leadership is
Oh,
relationship,
100%.
which
Yeah.
I think is, I mean, I'm completely on side with you because my whole book is all about relationships. Yeah. So I'm kind of sitting here really thinking this is fantastic that you're saying all this, because it's actually you're a living personification of
Mm,
how putting the relationship at the heart of your leadership as what has really made a difference
yeah.
and helped you navigate what could potentially be tricky situations
Yeah.
as well, because you've got those relationships with people.
Yeah. And I think maybe just one other build on that is it's also important to recognize what role you're playing in a particular relationship with someone at work. So, for example, I lead a team of about 20 people, but I'm part of a leadership team of a broader 50 people in my current public sector client setting. And as an engagement manager, I am responsible for that, like the team's outputs, right? So I am responsible for my 20-person team's outputs. And if somebody doesn't deliver something, I obviously need to have that conversation with them. However, we all have challenges in and outside of work. And for example, if somebody in my team, I recognize that they're a bit low energy or they're not their usual self, I might slip into more of like a people coach or a people manager type persona. And actually, sometimes you have to draw quite a firm line between that and your delivery. So, in Capgemini, that's the moment when I'd go to their people manager internally, who they report to, and be like, okay, I'm worried about this person's well-being. I'm a bit worried about their drive, like something's happened. And making sure that you manage that in the right way is really important to both protect that person's potentially mental health or resilience, but also to protect your delivery too. And I think that's been quite a hard realization, because if you're working with someone day in day out and you notice a change and maybe they are having a bit of a wobble, it's really hard to not default I default to a bit of a caregiver or not to mumsy type capability. And actually, sometimes you have to recognize that we have people managers for a reason. We have things like dedicated mental health and well-being support for a reason. We have access to an employee assistance program, we have access to therapy, etc. And I think I naturally can sometimes slip into almost and I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained as a therapist. I find it fascinating and so interesting, but I do recognize that sometimes I can slip into that more people managery role.
Yeah, I'm hearing that part of your leadership is that you can discern and say, okay, I could go down that avenue. You're quite conscious as a leader then.
Mm,
I could go down that avenue, but actually I'm probably not best placed. I'm going to support this person by getting the people manager involved.
yeah,
That's a good level of awareness you've got there, India.
yeah. Well, it's not always been there. It's taken time to cultivate.
That's something that's evolved and that you've learnt along the way. What I'm also hearing is it's a great example of being clear around your boundaries and also managing that very tenuous balance between supporting people, making sure they're all okay, and then also getting the job done because you're there to get a job done.
Yeah,
But you can't do it unless your people are at
yeah,
their best. But you're treading that fine line, is what I'm hearing.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
How have you coped with the pressures of such a quick rise? Because it must have been quite pressured. I mean, I remember, for example, your first job, you were sent up to the Highlands of Scotland, miles away from your
Yeah,
family, your friends, the life that you knew.
yeah. Therapy. I think there's a blend of ways to deal with pressure, I think. So finding mentors, and I'm saying finding as a key word here, will completely unlock your experiences, your opportunities, but also your resilience. So that project I mentioned at GSK, there was a wonderful, amazing woman called Rizna who put me forward for it. And she said, I think I'm confident you can smash this, India, and but I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna help mentor you along the way, and I'm gonna make sure that you are a success at this, and you've got this. And that was so stressful, that role. And she just picked up the phone whenever I needed a chat and coached me through it, and imparted all her amazing knowledge and all the rest of it. I think as well there's a moment where recognizing when you're going 110% and recognizing that you cannot go 110% all the time. So a different experience. So last year I was working very, very hard on my client and loving it, to be clear, absolutely loving it. But my personal life was taking an impact because I was working longer hours. I didn't have as much mental capacity. So, for example, I wasn't dating, I wasn't socializing nearly as much, and I was putting most of my energy and my eggs into my work. And ultimately, I got promoted at the end of the year, and that happened it was organic, right? Because my boss turned around to me mid last year and said, "You'd be silly not to go for promotion. You're doing fantastically." But then this year, I started the year and I thought, I can't work like that again for another year. I can't go 110%. I need to drop back down to a nice 80/20 space. And that's really hard because you're excelling, you're kind of running on a bit of adrenaline, you're getting lots of kudos. People are telling you you're doing really well. It's fantastic. You're also actually probably batting away a lot of imposter syndrome because when you're in this fight and flight mode, the rubbishy voices in your head can sometimes get a bit louder. And then when you take a moment to pause and stop, it can really quickly feel like you're not doing enough, or all the requests that come in and people asking for help, you just feel like you're saying no to everything. You have to sit in that sometimes, and you have to really protect. My motto this year has been protect your peace, or protect my peace. So I've been saying no a lot to things and recognizing that this is not a year that I want to go 110% at work. I want to carve out time for my friends, for my family. I want a bit more balance because otherwise, this is why people work in the city and go crazy and they burn out. And I don't ever want to be in that position. So,
So what I'm hearing is you've started to kind of start to work much more on your own
mm, mm,
terms rather than being on this. We almost get on, I can totally get what you're describing. You almost get on the
yeah,
treadmill and start running
yeah,
and you can't stop and it sounds like you were running faster and faster and
Yeah.
faster, and it's kind of, you couldn't reach the button to slow it all down. But now you're actually making some choices. So I'm really curious because you talk about, you've said no to much more this
Yeah.
year. I work with a lot of women clients. I run lots of leadership programs for women, and one of the issues they have is saying no. And that's partly because as women, we're socialized to facilitate and make sure everyone's okay. And so we're very good at saying yes to others and not so much to
Mm.
ourselves first. Tell me, how do you go about saying no?
Whew.
Well, you must be doing it well if you found you've slowed down this year.
So I think there are some tactical ways to say no, which doesn't look exactly like you're the one saying no. So sometimes this year I've escalated up the chain when I've had like five things come to me, right? And I'm like, five things all apparently need my time and these are all amazing opportunities. And I just kind of say, like, look, there's five things here. I have capacity to do one. Like, see, more senior people, like, which one is your priority? And then that makes it a bit easier to say no to the other things because you have a really clear argument of, I've escalated to my seniors, the business decision is this is the one thing I really need to nail. I'm sorry, I can't support these other things. And then I think in a slightly different tangent, in we get a lot of demand in my current client from new people asking for AI tools and AI products. And I think the way that I would say no there is usually showing them quite subtly that actually the idea that they have is probably not viable or not feasible, or bring it back to the data, right? So if I've got four new people reach out to me for four new AI products, and of those four, three have terrible data, I just quite lightly say, okay, I'm concerned about the data quality here. Or like if it's a process they want to improve but they actually don't have any control over the process, highlighting that, okay, we could build the coolest, sexiest tool in the world, but you're just telling me that you can't have any impact on the process in which it would sit, so it will never be used. So I try and pull levers that don't make it about me saying no. It's more about showing why, unfortunately, that particular idea or requirement just doesn't fit in my priority list, either from like a strategic standpoint or otherwise. Because also, you never want to be the bad guy. You never want to be the person whose reputation is, oh, India, she just says no. It's she listens, she understands my requirement, but she highlighted a few things that aren't really going to work, or she highlighted why she's going to be picking up something else because it's a higher priority based on X, Y, Z. So I think again, it comes back to talk to people again, understand where their pain is coming from, why they want help, and sometimes as well you can ferry them to others, right? Like I've got a great team like who can talk about, sometimes it's talking about the work that we've delivered in our public sector organization or client. We can talk about that to them. Someone else can pick it up. It doesn't have to always be me.
Yeah, so knowing where you can
Yeah.
delegate as well,
Yeah.
then as well sounds really fabulous. So, you started our conversation off by saying, "I want to get to VP." That was kind of your ambition. Has your ambition, having taken this time this year to slow down
Yeah.
and but sort of rebalance your life, as it were,
Yeah.
what does success mean to you now?
That's a great question. Success means to me ultimately that I feel happy, healthy, stretched, and kind of like balanced. So success for me is doing well at work in something that I
Right.
enjoy, and yes, progressing, but I've taken away the label of, oh, I want to be a VP, or oh, I want to be, I used to be like, I want to be a director by the time I'm 30. And I've taken that pressure off myself because I don't actually think it's helpful. Because if you look across jobs, right, titles mean nothing when you look in the job market. You have to take it all with such a pinch of salt. And I think success for me is like, so I spoke a bit about my mum, and I don't want to, you know, take her words and like necessarily share them fully here, but she has reflected that she made choices which meant that she was less around when we were children. And I am so grateful because she was an amazing mum. She is an amazing mum. She was such an inspiration growing up. I'm in awe of her every day. Like she's still smashing it. God, I feel emotional. But I think there's a moment where I want to pretend that you can go and be these top people and have a great work-life balance. I'm not sure we're there yet still, regardless of gender, right? Men or women. And I don't think I want my life to be all work all the time. So success is making sure I have quality time with friends and family, making sure I have time to go and exercise, making sure that I have time to like cook a really nice dinner that I like really just fancy getting in the kitchen because that's how I unwind. So my parameters around success are moving away from actually organizational levels, let's say, and I'd like to think becoming more holistic. So that doesn't mean that I won't still hopefully climb a bit, but I'm not gun ho focused on it like I was.
Yeah. I get the sense of being much more holistic. It's interesting because a previous episode, what we talked about in terms of what the sort of leaders we need in the world, as in the state of the world as it is now, and it is leaders who are more
Mm,
holistic
mm,
and see the world through a more holistic
yeah.
lens. So we touched there about you mentioned gender. So let's move on to talking about that because I'm also curious. You
Mhm.
are a young woman, and again, I can think of many
Yeah,
women I've coached who haven't been necessarily young, but they'll get called young. Like you're very young to be a leader because they look
yeah,
young because they're a woman. What I suppose, but my question is, what are some of the biases you've had to navigate, and were you conscious of them at the time, or is it on reflection?
yeah,
Because I think that's the challenge, isn't it? We're often not conscious that someone is acting in a biased way. But tell us a bit
yeah.
about some of the experiences you've had and how you navigated them.
So when I moved to, you mentioned earlier, I moved to Aberdeen. I was actually working in a manufacturing site in a place called Montrose. And I think there was a lot, I was the youngest person in the office. I think there was some, and I was on the, inverted commas, future leaders program. That didn't probably land very well among some of my colleagues who'd worked on the site for a long time and had a lot more experience than I did. But that was also very formative because before that moment, I don't think I'd ever thought that there was still a gender gap. Quite naively, to be honest, because I did biochemistry at uni, but my class was very gender balanced. My year in industry at GSK, it was very gender balanced. Like the head of my team at this point in time was a woman. But in Montrose, the manufacturing site I was working in, not all the buildings had female loos, but all the buildings had male loos. Because historically, shift workers were male, and we had some female shift workers coming through. And it's a really small thing, but if you're in the middle of a night shift and you have to walk like 10 minutes to the next building or 50 minutes to the next building to go to the loo because you're a woman, it just seems crazy because I was like, it must have been like 2018, 2017. So I think I started to definitely see some of those gaps there. And then I think as well, just if you look at, I work in a big firm, which is fantastic, and we have very good gender balance across our lower grades, possibly up to manager, senior manager. And this is in the gender reports, right? It's not as strong at director, senior director, VP. It's getting better, but it's not. So it's still there, and we have to keep pushing, right? Like we have to keep going. But I think I've been relatively lucky that I've never felt like my gender has imposed me or stopped me in my career. But I do think it's made me more aware. So maybe on a slightly different tangent, so public sector organization I work in now is quite male dominated. And there's been quite a few times where I've been in the room presenting to quite a male dominated audience, and that has made me go, ooh, okay, cool. This is different. But what that's then informed is, okay, I'm woman, but I'm a white woman. Like, how does it feel if you're a black woman? Or how does it feel if, there's so much diversity out there. And I think that's also what I really want to also try and help drive, because when you start to look at the intersectionality, so the UK is a massively multicultural, massively diverse part of the world, but yet all of our bank holidays are focused around like the Christian calendar. Like it's really interesting when you start to unpick it. Like, should that be right? Like, should we be making sure that we have bank holidays for Eid, for example, or other religious holidays? So I'm sorry, Mary, I don't really think I'm answering your question, but for me, it's like there's still work to do on the gender gap, but actually there's a lot more work to do more broadly across all type diverse.
I think what I'm hearing is you have experienced gender bias. I also hear you've not necessarily been triggered or hooked
Yeah,
by it. You've kind of just got on with things. But I also get
yeah.
your commitment. It's not just about gender; it's about diversity as a whole. And
Mm,
I think you're right because the McKinsey report talks about 2 steps forward, 1 step back when it comes to gender equity. But if you're a woman of colour, it's even more challenging. They have, you will be experiencing an even harder time. So diversity as a whole absolutely needs our attention. What, therefore, do you think inclusive leadership is for you?
For me, it's actually small changes and small actions. So when senior people or senior leaders think about the language they use, it's about saying, partner rather than wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend. It's about asking questions. It's about recognizing different lifestyles and different values and how people prioritize them. So I think we've fallen into a bit of a moment where sometimes it's really on those diverse pockets to, they feel like they have to like educate the senior leaders or they have to. So I think they must sometimes feel like they're under a spotlight, right? So having to share their experiences all the time, but actually, so much of inclusive leadership for me should just happen organically through. And this boils down to this is my personal leadership style, right? Like I want to know the people that I work with. I want to know them on a personal level. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what they get up to, like in an evening, because I don't want to just get on a call every day and be like, "Have you done the work? What's going on?" Like I want that connection. So for me, it's like small things like that, and and occasionally it is having the uncomfortable conversations, right? So when there was the what it means to be a woman debate in parliament recently, that was really disappointing. And like as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm a bisexual woman. I have non-binary friends and others, and I just think it was a big step back for like the wider like trans community and how we recognize women. So therefore inclusive leadership for me is sometimes just saying exactly that. Like I was disappointed by this decision, and I said that recently in a in an all hands call in Capgemini. So it's small actions, I think, rather than necessarily big bold things, especially if you're not part of that community. But obviously the only way we're going to get people part of that community is also helping others from a whole range of diverse backgrounds up the chain, as you like, and giving them a platform and a space and a voice. You can't expect them to do all the educating. Like you have to show curiosity and willingness to learn, really.
I hear there, then what you're saying then is do what you can
Yeah,
and in small steps influence where you can,
yeah,
challenge
yeah,
if it seems appropriate, but also keep working on yourself, is what I'm hearing. It comes back to how you manage yourself and how you build those relationships with people. I'm not hearing any blame or criticism, which is very encouraging to hear that there isn't any of that. It's just about educating and influencing where you can.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So let's just now then look because you are a young leader and you probably work with older leaders. What do you wish more senior leaders understood about your generation?
Um, I think there's fundamentally some changes. This isn't new news. People in my generation, or even generations younger than me, we're not one company for lifers. Like, that's just not how the world works anymore. But I do think there's a balance, right? Because how do we try and retain the best talent, but by giving them the right opportunities and continuing to grow them, we don't want to stagnate them, but also recognizing at some point there's a moment there they will probably jump off and move on. And I don't think we've really worked out how we do that in a good way. I also think there's some stuff around. So I work in the service industry now. Historically, I was the same for my mum, right? Historically, lots of the perks were going out for client dinners and having like, I don't want to say parties, but like, pre-COVID and also in like, my mum's working life, there was a lot more like work socializing. And I would say that actually my generation and particularly the generations below my generation still probably happens, but the ones below, they're less interested in it. Like they don't care about you putting on a thing at the pub and everyone getting together and playing darts. They want to come in, they want to do their hours, and they want to go home. So actually, how do we make sure that we, because and that is absolutely fine, but creating connection with people and creating community is actually really hard sometimes when you don't have that. And it shouldn't always be in a pub, like it shouldn't always be in an alcohol setting, but when you can't get people together for those like informal non-work type catch ups, that becomes challenging. So there's definitely some pieces there about how we engage with the younger generations, recognizing that they don't tend to drink as much. They're not as into pub culture as the millennials were or are, that we need to have a think about.
Yes. So looking at the trends of those particular generations and finding
Mm,
some way of connecting in those ways. And that
yeah,
reminds me
yeah.
of hybrid working then as well, because I think that also presents
Mm,
challenges for how you keeping your culture as an organization alive and keep people
yeah.
connected that way. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, so for me, it's about getting people together in a room occasionally. And I don't, so we did something earlier this year. We ran a leadership training workshop for everyone on our program. And that was across the public sector, organizations, people, and our people. So it was like 60, 70 people in a room. And it was all about deciding what we wanted the identity of our team to be and what we wanted to be known for, and coming up with coming up with like a cultural, like almost like a bit, right? Like what, when people talk about our team, what's the catchphrase that wants to come with it? And that was fantastic because that was a way to get people together, bonding. It was all around being uncomfortable and sharing beyond work with people. So yeah, I loved it because I was like, let's all get to know each other personally. So there's definitely things like that. But I also think we have to be conscious that because of COVID, we now have, lots of people who flexible working for them will always be 5 days a week at home, and that's okay because they might have childcare commitments or caring commitments, or they might just like it. Like I work with a lot of very great technical people who love to be in their little zone at home and it's quiet. And we need to think harder about how we include those people because we're not going to get them coming into the office 2 days a week, and that is okay. But I don't know exactly what the solution is right now. But equally, I don't need to have the solution because there are lots of fantastic people that will have lots of great ideas. So but it might just be informal coffee drop-in sessions every Tuesday and Thursday, like for 15 minutes. Pop in if you want to, or it might just be that you make sure that they have a really good people manager who knows them really well, and you're confident that if there was any flight risk or frustrations, or they didn't feel part of the community or team, they would raise it through them, and then you could kind
Mm.
of take action and fold them in a different way. But
I think it's one of those ongoing things, isn't it? And again, I should imagine it's about getting the balance right. Okay, so if someone was listening to this conversation, I hope we have got someone listening to this conversation who's in their
mhm,
20s and wondering whether they have what it
yeah,
takes, what would be one thing you would want them to hear from you?
so you do have what it takes is the first thing, but you have what it takes to do something you're passionate about. I have what it takes to be really good in AI product innovation and also to be a really good people manager and things like that because I care. I don't have what it takes to be a champion kite surfer, and that's okay. So, like, be honest with yourself about. I find it's really useful to reflect on what are your values, what makes you tick, like, what do you enjoy? Like, as I said at the beginning, for me, it's like problem solving, working with people, collaborating. That's why
Yes,
I think I've done well in my career
because those are your values as well, I hear.
because those are my values, exactly. So if you listen to your values and also I would air this with a tiny pinch of salt that says, because I'm recognizing there might be some people going, oh, I love, when I was growing up, I loved performing, and for a long time I wanted to go and do like musical theatre, and then I realized I could go and do this, but I would then end up hating the thing that I love because it would be my job. So there's also a tiny pinch of salt in that. Do have what it takes as something that you're passionate about, but just think about, do you want that to be your, if you love haberdashery, do you want that to be your full-time job? I don't know. Yes, it might be. It might not be. So, yeah, that would be my advice. What are you passionate about?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing really strong is start with your values. When we live a life that's aligned with our values, life just
Yeah,
works so much easier
yeah,
and we're so much happier.
agreed.
So we're coming to the close of our conversation. It's been a really interesting conversation with some wonderful insights. I'd like to invite you though for our sort of final piece to just share with us one thing that you'd love our listeners to, especially our women leader listeners, to take away from your journey so far?
You are never alone in something. So if you're in a role and it's really crunchy and it's really hard, don't be afraid to go and find a mentor or like lean on someone in your network for support. And in the same vein, like to what I said earlier, you don't have to say yes to everything.
Yes.
Like you really don't. So
The world is not going to end if you say no.
no, exactly. Exactly. And I think as well, like I remember when I worked at GSK, I'd get very stressed about my task list sometimes. I remember my boss once turned to me and said, "If you don't do this today, will someone die?" And it was like, no, no, they won't. So it can wait until Monday, or it can wait a week, or it can wait
Yeah.
to another deadline. So you have to set your own boundaries. You can either be horrible to yourself or you can be kind to yourself. And I really hope that you are kind to yourself because the only person that puts the most pressure on you and expects the most of you is you.
So self-compassion coming through. And so you've given us lots and lots of things there to take away. No,
Sorry.
that's no bonus, all bonuses. Thank you, India. That's been fantastic. So really the whole thing is
Yeah,
seek the support. I hear
yeah,
you were proactive in getting mentors, so seek the support,
yeah,
say no,
yes.
self-compassion. There's three things that people can take away that will make a difference. India, thank you so much. It's been a real joy speaking with you today.
Thanks, Mary. Always delighted to see your smiling face.
And you too. And I'll see you again soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I want to share something with you. Do you ever feel like your confidence isn't really the issue, but wish you could strengthen your ability to deal with things that keep chipping away at it? The bias, the double standards, the pressure to prove yourself, to name just a few. That's exactly why I created Exploding the Confidence Myth, a 3-month programme for women leaders who are ready to change that story. It combines one-to-one coaching, group coaching, and a powerful in-person workshop. The next programme starts at the beginning of November, with the workshop taking place on the 7th of November at the Connaught Rooms in Holborn, London. Past participants have described it as validating, supportive and stretching. They've become more visible, raised their value, increased their financial return and broken through patterns that have held them back. But perhaps, most importantly, they've gained a deeper sense of okayness with who they are, recognising they already have something valuable to offer. If this resonates with you or you know someone who would benefit, you'll find all the details in the show notes. I'd love you to join us. Thank you so much for listening to the She Leads Collective podcast. If this episode resonated with you, follow the show or share it with a friend and leave a quick review below. Or leave us a comment. Change happens through conversation, so let's keep this one going. Listen out for the next episode and join me as we keep lifting the lid on the stories that matter. Take care and keep leading with heart.